And Lisa is not a crazy fat acceptance activist. We jokingly talk about her as the anti-Hannah, and I'll be the anti-William. Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. For today, what I have on the channel is I'm actually doing my first ever interview with Miss Lisa King. She is going to be sharing her experiences with medical fat phobia, and we're both going to pontificate upon what we are calling the medical fat phobia to toxic fat acceptance pipeline, essentially. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting discussion. Lisa has, a very, very interesting story in regards to her hormone health and everything involving fatness. So this is going to be a great interview, and I'm really excited about it. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody, Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa King. I am on my weight loss journey right now. I've lost close to 45 pounds. I am documenting this on my YouTube channel at the moment, where you can see me do some weight loss updates, some cool things like different kind of food hauls and different things I'm doing for my diet. I also do a lot of girly things like makeup videos, but also reactions to the fat acceptance community's TikToks, where I give my own point of view on things related to what constitutes health.
Yes. And I am subscribed, so I am over there. And I do talk in the comments sometimes. And I'm just kidding. I do. But let's go ahead and get started here. So what is your story?
Yeah, so I, like a lot of people today, I am morbidly obese. I used to be super morbidly obese, and I've now lost as I said, close to 45 pounds. And this has allowed me to get into the morbidly obese category, and I'm still hoping to lose more weight. I want to be healthy. I want to be a healthy weight, and just it'll improve my life drastically. But getting to this point of becoming super morbidly obese and morbidly obese, was a real trip growing up, because it just didn't happen overnight. There's a long process to becoming overweight and how it happened. And I know that something that you talk about on your channel all the time is hormone health. And that's exactly what impacted my weight gain, was really, really bad hormone health.
So I will just say, you are definitely the kind of person that the fat acceptance community would use as an example. They often try to use someone like you, which we will get into a lot of the hormonal issues you have, but they'll try to use somebody that's like you, that has sort of atypical hormonal issues, and they try to paint everybody that is fat with that broad brush, or with, they try to act like everybody's the same way. So just to get started, like, I'll let you guys know in the audience, like, Lisa does have PCOS, for example. So she is one of the people that they would use, And a lot of people in the fat acceptance community also have PCOS. So I do think that Lisa has some really valuable perspective on her experience within the medical community. And Lisa is not a crazy fat acceptance activist. We jokingly talk about her as the anti-Hannah, and I'll be the anti-William. Maybe as William gains weight, I'll lose it. No, I'm just kidding. We'll meet in the middle someday, William. But a lot of people in my comments were shading him for that, by the way.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about a lot of people in the fat acceptance community having PCOS, because one thing I constantly hear when I watch these videos by people like Hannah Talks Bodies and other fat acceptance community and like fat liberation people is that they'll say, "I'm healthy" in one sentence and then list all the diseases they have in another sentence. And they're like, you cannot be healthy and have PCOS, thyroid disease, fatty liver. Like, those two things and those two concepts cannot coexist.
And it's almost like a form of gaslighting, which they do that. But it's a little bit, it's almost like they're doing it to themselves, I've noticed, because it's like, I'm healthy, but like you said, here's my list of diseases. Or it's like in that podcast where I had on my channel, where Hannah Talks Bodies was talking in a podcast, and she was saying, health at every size. People try to, straw man it and say that people are saying that you can be healthy at any size, or, or you can have a good state of good health at any size. And then in the next sentence, she's like, which a lot of people can. And it's like, well, then you're saying that.
Yeah.
So you're strawmanning yourself, Hannah.
Yeah, and Hannah Talks Bodies is also the kind of person who will tell you it's impossible to lose weight. I think her line was, weight loss is a phase, not a destination. Yeah.
Yes. Or she says all weight is weight cycling,
Yeah.
which, it kills me. There was one where one of her TikToks where she said that, and it kills me because, again, on my channel, I really come at this from a hormonal perspective, and I really talk about it in terms, especially of hypothyroidism, which Lisa does have as well. So it's something really important. And when you are really, really severe, you do experience weight cycling. You can
Mhm.
experience weight cycling within the context of the seasons. And people will use that as a reason to say you can never lose weight. And it's like, no, when you work on it, you're doing better year over year. You can still lose, even if you gain a bit back, you still lose it back. Like, it's a process when your hormones are very severe that people don't get, which I will say, I believe I'm getting to a point now where my hormones are more typical. They're getting better. So I'm getting to a point where I can have a little bit more of a typical, dieting or weight loss journey, which is great. But it took me almost 2 years to get there. It takes
Yeah.
time. So,
And I think what
anyway.
you said also brings to like kind of the point of why I'm here. And it's that you have these people in the fat acceptance community saying these things that you can't possibly lose weight. And it's like, how did they get to that? How did they get to these ideas that we know are not true, that are, can be considered kind of crazy? And I just don't think it comes out of a vacuum. I think it comes out
Yes.
of shared experiences amongst these various people that leads them to this conclusion.
Yes. I think every single super morbidly obese and morbidly obese person has experienced weight cycling, for
Mhm.
example. That is very real. That is a reality. People will come to my channel sometimes. They don't realize I've lost 80 pounds, gained it back, lost 70 pounds again, then gained it back. People don't realize that, a lot of people that are so big, we have done things like I did keto, for example. It's a very strict diet. And it did not work. So when I speak out against it, I'm saying it specifically within the context of being very, very, very big. And I think a lot of people can't see that we experience things differently based on how extreme the issue is, how many hormonal issues we have, and even, when it comes to things like biological sex, you would experience hormones and weight gain and loss differently as a woman than I do as a man.
Yes.
And these are all realities that we don't talk enough about. So people always assume every single person feels the same. And we know sizes are different. And
Yeah.
we know biological sex is different.
And I
Those are
like
two objective things.
definitely, and I like how you brought that up because we've talked about this many times in private about how when women lose weight, there's only 2 weeks out of the month where you can actually see yourself losing weight. And that is because of your
Mhm.
menstruation cycle. And so you're gaining water weight the week before your period, and then you're losing it the week of your period. And so because of that fluctuation in weight, if you're just measuring yourself on a scale or even pant size, because that water weight does increase your waist
Mhm.
size, it's gonna look like, oh, weight loss is such a struggle. And so women definitely have to look at their weight loss over a very long-term trend
Yes.
versus men are a little bit more linear. They still have
Mhm.
fluctuations, it's just not to the same degree.
Mhm.
And that, we can talk about that a little bit more when we
Mhm.
talk about, geez, does it seem to be that more women are struggling with this whole fat
Mhm.
acceptance community thing than men seem to?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely agree. I think women definitely need to look at it on a month by month basis, whereas men can look at it on a week by week basis, which is different, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, which we have a lot to cover. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about it. So
Mhm.
Um, so it's in my notes here, it says that you started gaining weight really around puberty.
Yeah, so exactly. I started gaining weight around the ages of 12, 13 years old. And this is around the time that I started my first period. And from the beginning, I sensed something was wrong. And I didn't know how to explain it to anybody because I was so young. And I was telling my mom and my doctor, I was like, I don't think there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my period. And everybody just kept excusing things away. They kept saying, oh, that's normal. I don't want to get into many gross details or anything, but the things that were wrong, they were saying were normal. And even then I knew, even though I knew nothing about it, I was like, this just doesn't seem right. And along with that, I was gaining weight. I did not know at the time I was having polycystic ovarian syndrome symptoms, which includes gaining weight. It causes irregular periods. It causes heavier than average periods. It causes very painful periods due to factors regarding that. And it can cause certain things like insulin resistance. And so you start to gain some weight just naturally from the PCOS. So one thing that we can talk about too is a lot of people say, well, I eat a normal amount, but I'm gaining weight. And typically that's never the case. They're overeating. They just don't realize they're overeating. When it comes to PCOS, that initial weight gain, yes, you can be eating a normal amount and gain weight. You're not gaining a lot of weight, but you're gaining a little bit of weight. But it's also making you hungrier because of that insulin resistance. So even though you start gaining weight and then you get hungrier and then you gain more weight and you're hungrier. And it's like this weird, horrific cycle. And so I was going to the doctor and I was like, I'm gaining weight. I don't know what to do. My mom is like really concerned. And they just told me to cut calories and exercise more. And it wasn't working because it's like, if you're really, really hungry, either you're starving and losing weight or you're overeating and you don't feel hungry, but you can't have both when you have these hormonal issues.
Well, insulin resistance, we know, everybody pretty much knows that your insulin response is directly correlated to hunger. And I try to talk about this on my channel, and people say a lot of times, my people that criticize will say, well, I'm hypothyroid and I don't have a tendency to overeat. To which I respond, your hypo is, one, likely treated, which is huge. If you're treating it, try to go without your meds and see how you feel, right? And two, low thyroid hormone is often answered by high adrenaline. And when your adrenaline is high, then you start to have insulin resistance. So I obviously do not have PCOS, spoiler alert, but I do have, I had massive adrenal issues caused by higher estrogen levels and just the diets I was doing, just everything. I've talked about it many times on my channel, but one of the things is the hunger, which is directly caused by insulin resistance that is caused by high adrenaline, which is ultimately caused by low thyroid. And that's something that people don't get. There is a connection to all of our hormones. So when Lisa is experiencing insulin resistance directly tied to her PCOS, that alone is going to make her hungrier and she's going to eat more.
And what you're talking about with the adrenaline, that's directly related to a whole thyroid hormonal issue. With PCOS, there's the added aspect of you're having extra androgen and hormones being produced in your body, and that's what causes the spikes in insulin and insulin resistance. So if you have PCOS and thyroid disease, you're going to hit on both ends.
Yep. Which is crazy.
It is
very difficult. And that's where people need to acknowledge that it is harder. It's harder, although it's not impossible. And that's really, although because you're in a different category, so to speak, like you're not as a typical person, because you have PCOS, you do look at the diet and these types of things from a different perspective, which we'll get to later.
And we're definitely not excusing, like I said, we're not fat acceptance community people. We're not saying, oh, and therefore it's impossible to lose weight. We're just saying, no, we have to take special care of our bodies, and it's going to be a little bit harder, but it's still possible, and we're still trying.
Yes. And again, it does affect Lisa differently. So there are certain things where she may have to do things a little bit different or be stricter in some ways. maybe
So,
less strict in others. Like, it just depends. It's a different circumstance
yeah.
than the average person and certainly than the average man.
Yeah.
It's very different.
It's important for people to understand this because we definitely see a lot of people on the other side of the issue being like, just cut your calories and you'll lose weight. And it's like, it's just not that simple.
No, and it's not to say, again, on this channel, we are
Mhm.
caloric realists,
Yeah.
okay? Yes, you will have to be in a deficit, but if you cannot sustain it, then it doesn't matter if you're in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
Definitely. So yeah, going back to like my history with dieting then.
mm,
So I was gaining weight and I wasn't morbidly obese at this part. I think I was overweight on the border of obesity at the age of 14 years old. And my family, we started the Atkins diet because it was like 2003.
ooh,
Like it was the year of Atkins. And if anybody knows anything about Atkins, it's worse than keto. It is it
ooh,
goes way harder.
really?
Yeah, definitely on the carb, at least in my opinion. That's what I know. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my experience with Atkins. It feels way harder than keto.
How much, so my impression of Atkins as
Mhm,
somebody who, I did keto very heavily
mhm.
and very strictly. Atkins, it seems to me that it was much higher in protein and yet lower in fat. Is that correct?
I just I wish I knew because this was like also 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am 33. But what to me it felt like is like we were avoiding any and all carbs. It just felt like no
Okay.
carbs at all, but it wasn't carnivore. You could still have like broccoli, and because broccoli is
Ooh,
so low when it comes to carbs, but that was basically it.
yeah. Because to me, or what it sounds like to me, and what I remember when I would hear comparisons of the diets, is that Atkins is also, it's very, very high protein
Mhm.
and it's lower in fat, which
Oh,
I agree would definitely be worse. And keto is very harsh. I'm sorry to any of my keto people. I'm not trying to be offensive, but it's very, very, very
mhm.
difficult. But the fat is satiating and it makes you less hungry and you burn less muscle. If
That
you're
does
just
sound right though, because I remember having lots of
Mhm.
Atkins protein shakes that were basically just like artificial sugar and and just like these like
Yeah,
milkshake things, and
it's
they
very
were
harsh because your body tends to, when you're eating only protein like that, it tends to break down your
Mhm.
muscle
Yeah,
easier because it's used to metabolizing protein. So if you
yeah.
were in a deficit combined with that, it's very, very harsh. And I do agree that it is worse,
Mhm.
which is bad because keto is really difficult, I will
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, and, so I
And you're
did that
probably
for a while,
hungrier.
and I lost something like I can't remember how much I lost, but I think I lost 15 or 20 pounds, and I was about 5'5", and I just remember all my family members telling me how great I looked because at this point I was in the high range of normal at this point, and
Mhm.
I was 14 years old, and everybody was telling me how I looked amazing, and I just remember I couldn't even see straight. I felt like there was black around my eyes and I was like having
Ooh,
tunnel vision and I felt miserable every day. And then people were telling me just like I looked great. And I'm like, well, if I look great, why do I feel like I'm
yeah.
dying? Because it happens. That's why.
Yeah, I felt that
Um,
way on keto. I mean, I didn't have
yeah.
tunnel vision, but
Mhm,
I really was going nuts, like,
mhm,
mentally, and I used to just feel this, like this
mhm.
buzzing in my
Yeah.
body all the time, and I couldn't sleep. It was
Yeah.
crazy. So I definitely can relate, and I was 80 pounds lighter, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's yeah, must have been, and I can't even imagine doing that at 14. That
Yeah.
must have been crazy.
And I felt very pressured by my mom because she was afraid of me, being unhealthy. And like parents don't mean to do that and
Right.
cause like those complexes, but it just ends up happening. And I know another thing with Atkins, I'm not really sure about keto, but I know with Atkins, like it's very anti-fruit. You're not supposed to have like
Mhm.
any fruit unless it's like a fruit that's a vegetable. And even then, it's like you have to be really careful about how many
It's the
carbs you're
same.
eating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that put me on this long, long like journey of where I barely ate any fruit for like, I don't know, decades.
Right.
And now I know fruit's the best thing ever for
Yeah,
you.
it's one of the best things.
Yeah, and it's how I've lost all my weight. People are like, "You eat how many servings of fruit a day?" And I'm like, sometimes like up to 10 servings of fruit a day, and it makes me feel
It's
energized
yeah,
and yeah,
it's one
it's
of the
great.
most pro-thyroid
Yeah,
foods, in the world.
Yeah.
Fructose in and of itself is beautiful for your thyroid health
Yes.
because it gives the energy to the liver to convert your hormone. It's
Mhm.
very important. That's why, like you said, people usually, people who eat a lot of fruit, they do have an easier time keeping their weight down because you also get a lot of vitamin C and potassium, which help with insulin resistance, which
Yeah,
is key to appetite, for example.
definitely.
Yeah,
And so, regardless of like losing the 15 pounds, I felt terrible.
right.
And I
You
also
could have
those
used
symptoms
some orange juice. You could
definitely.
have
Oh
had
my
some
God.
bananas.
I remember also, gosh, I know I'm getting sidetracked, but I have this distinct memory now of doing Atkins and not being allowed to drink orange juice.
Oh,
I know, it's awful. And now I'm like at like, my old age of 33, if I'm like I'm tired, I just have like a glass of orange juice. It's like a really great pick me up.
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Beautiful. It's so good.
yeah. But anyways, yeah, when I was 14, feeling miserable, and I was still having really terrible PCOS symptoms that I did not know was PCOS.
Yeah.
And I was going to the doctor, and they were just basically telling me that I was lying. They're like, you
Oh,
can't possibly be eating as little as you say you do. You can't possibly be doing this. Can't possibly be exercising as much as you say you are. And they're just telling me, they're just saying to do more of it. And then they were saying, that the symptoms I was describing them couldn't possibly be true. Like, for example, if I was saying I was having a really heavy period, they're like, well, that's just impossible. The average woman can't have a period like that. Well, I'm like, I'm telling you that I am. And so
right.
just no one believed me. And I had this experience with doctors like over and
Mm.
over and over again. And it wasn't until I was in my like early to mid 20s. I want to say around I was 25. And I went to a dermatologist and I was having this horrific acne right here.
Mm.
And I had dermatitis, and like it's like a yeast infection type dermatitis on my scalp. And she was looking at it and she was like, with your weight and these two skin things together, that's really characteristic of PCOS. And I'm like, well, what's PCOS? And she says it's
Mm.
polycystic ovarian syndrome. It can cause this weight gain and these skin issues that you're having. And she was like the first person ever to bring that up to me, a dermatologist.
Ugh.
And anyways, I was living in Japan at the time, and she gave me a referral, and Japan accepts American referrals. They're pretty chill with that. And I took my referral to an OBGYN to Japan, and they tested me with a whole bunch of like invasive procedures and blood tests. And they're like, yep, you got PCOS. We got to start treating you. And all I could think
Wow.
was like, I've been having these symptoms for like 12, 13 years. And not one doctor
Mm.
figured it out except for the dermatologist?
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's,
And
yeah.
go ahead.
That would make me really angry.
Yeah. Well, just to think about if I had started treatment early, how so many of these weight issues could have been avoided.
Hmm.
Because I wouldn't have had the insulin resistance, the hunger, all these different things. Because here's another thing too. When I talk about insulin resistance, I had been borderline type 2 diabetes my entire teenage years and early 20s.
Mm.
And they're always just like, well, you got to lose weight and then you won't be borderline type 2 diabetes. Well, once I started getting treated for PCOS, all that went away. I am no
Yeah.
longer borderline type 2 diabetes because treating the PCOS treated the insulin resistance.
Yep. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people that I criticize a lot of fat acceptance people because they do not advocate for dealing with these diseases. They just
Yeah.
say, I have them. And it's like, period, end of the sentence, end of discussion. It's like, why aren't you telling people to get their PCOS treated, get their hypothyroid treated, get certain things treated? And again, I believe you can, if you want to do things, I do things in a more naturopathic type of way. And I think whatever you want to do, right? You can go the traditional route, you can do whatever you need to do for yourself, but do something.
Yeah.
And I will say that, like, do something about it. Like, do not accept PCOS, right? We don't need PCOS acceptance. You
Yeah.
need to go get treated for your PCOS. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and people just act like a lot of the fat acceptance activists, it's like, I don't know, they don't mention that. at all. Like, they don't talk about like, I should get this treated, or I should do this, or this is what I do to get treated. Or if you feel like you have PCOS, they should be doing something a little bit more useful or like helpful, because
Yeah.
maybe there are other women that are going through that could hear it from them.
And I can understand and having this experience in the medical like setting, I do understand why they don't get treatment, because the two responses that you're going to get from doctors is, one, if you lose weight, your PCOS symptoms could go away. But it's very hard to also lose weight with PCOS. So it's like a double-edged thing. And the second one is
Right.
their option is birth control. And a lot of women do not want to go on
Hmm.
birth control. And so when they're only giving you those two options, it makes it very difficult to get treatment. So there is that
Right.
aspect to it. And so like this kind of brings me to my main point of it. Like there's a definite connection between these women who are in the fat acceptance community and then just really terrible medical care and medical advice on the
Yes.
other end.
Yes. And I don't make excuses
Mhm,
for terrible medical care, or
mhm.
um, you know, we have been completely failed. Me and you both,
Yeah.
we were completely failed by the institutions. And that's something that we need to talk about. And we can talk about that without denying reality at the
Yeah.
same time.
And then even the process of getting treated for PCOS, like I was very fortunate to be in Japan at the time for this, because they are very strict when it comes to giving out birth control, and they would not give it to me. They wouldn't even consider it because I was overweight, and they didn't want to
Mhm,
risk blood pressure, stroke, things like that.
mhm.
And I didn't want it either. That was like my last resort medication. And so they had several other options. They're like, well, we're going to set you up with a nutritionist and help you lose weight, but that was kind of a bust because it sounds so stereotypical, but my nutritionist told me to eat more rice. And that was basically, and I was like, I'm not eating more rice when I have an insulin resistance problem. Like, let's be
Yeah.
real. And then the doctor said, okay, well, we're going to try progesterone, but progesterone is
Okay.
going to make your symptoms worse when it comes to your skin issues. And so that was very short lived. And then she
Right.
said, okay, we're going to do synthetic progesterone. That's going to have fewer side effect symptoms. And I did
Sure.
that, and it didn't increase my PCOS symptoms, but it also was not regulating my menstrual cycle. So I was still having the same issues.
Mhm.
And then they wanted to set me up with metformin. And metformin is actually a type 2
Mm.
diabetes drug, which has a side effect of regulating your menstrual cycle for women. And I mean, I guess they don't really know why. It just happens that way, but they
Oh,
will
Lord.
often give it with these PCOS. And it's a great option for a lot of women who do have PCOS. Unfortunately for me, the progesterone, one thing it did do was that it lowered my insulin resistance. And so in Japan, because I was no longer type 2 diabetes at that time, because before I was type 2, but type 2 diabetes, but I wasn't on medication for it. I went on progesterone, it went away. And they're like, oh, we can't give you the metformin now because you don't have type 2
Oh,
diabetes. And
wow. How weird.
I know it's like a whole other story, and it's longer than that, where they were trying to get it for me, but they were going to have to like falsely diagnose me with it. And I was like, that feels weird to me. It's a
Yeah.
story for another day. But what,
Wow. What a
yeah,
crazy experience.
but what ended up happening, I went through all those different options. I got back to the US and I'm like, I'm at my wit's end. Nothing is working. And I eventually landed on birth control. And
Okay.
it was the one thing that worked for me. And I swear this is gonna sound so strange. Like the after the first month of being on birth control, I felt like I could see color again. It was,
Okay.
yeah, it was like, the the gates opened up and there was heaven, because I had been so in so much pain and so low for so long due to these PCOS symptoms, where felt like I was in this constant haze where I couldn't
Mhm.
see straight, I couldn't function. I had passed out at work one time.
Oh, wow.
I was, because I was having severe iron issues, I was losing so
Right.
much blood, and when I finally had my period like regulated, I could work again. I could I could hold a job, because I was really struggling to hold a job before this because the PCOS symptoms were so severe.
Right.
And and that was an option that worked for me. But and this is something we could talk about now or later, but
Mhm.
I I don't recommend birth control for everyone. I'm
Right.
actually very anti birth control. That's why I didn't push it all in Japan to get it, because I was like, I did not want to go on it. I
Right.
don't think most women should be on it. I just made the exception for myself because I had a hormonal issue that it could fix
Right.
versus have somebody who does not have hormonal issues and then adding hormones to your body when you don't
Right.
need them.
It's very different.
It's very different.
And I think too, I tried to say that in my thyroid protocol video, and I will continue to say this, but there are going to be certain things where you have to make exceptions, or certain situations where certain things may benefit you, but not the general public. And one of the things that I've gotten the most criticism on is how I would eat a lot of candy, for example. But I was coming from a post ketogenic diet situation where I was so ravenous for carbs that it was really the only thing that would give me the energy to get through the day for me to still be able to work. Was it ideal? No, but because I didn't have a lot of money and it's cheap, it didn't have any PUFA in it, it did not do anything like that. I was still able to recover. And I actually, I had night blindness in early 2021 because my insulin resistance was so bad. And I was eating candy every single day for 6 months. And my night blindness went away just from getting rid of the PUFA. So, or, the seed oils and that kind of thing. And people always, they look at things in one view, like one thing at a time. So again, it's like you may be on birth control, but there are other things that you are doing. Like, for example, I know, because I know Lisa, she's on something for hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
So can you tell us what you take for that?
Yeah, definitely. So I take Armour Thyroid, and it's a more natural thyroid medication. They make it from pig thyroid, and it's very different from, say, synthetic thyroid. And the reason for this is because synthetic thyroid only gives you the T4 hormone. And so just so everyone knows, your thyroid produces T4. That T4 is then converted into T3, which is then absorbed by your gut and other parts of your body to produce to cause your body to function, digestion and liver, etc. And but what that synthetic thyroid does not take into account is that a lot of people with thyroid issues have trouble converting T4 into T3. So it doesn't matter for T4 if you don't have enough, or it's not going to matter if you can't convert to T3. So taking Armour Thyroid, it gives you T4 and T3. So if you're having conversion issues, which a lot of people do have, then you're going to get both of those. It's going to work better, more efficiently.
Right.
Doctors won't tell you that. They'll say the opposite, but everybody anecdotally, everybody I've ever talked to has said they felt so much better on those natural thyroid medications. And I say it's still doctor prescribed. It's not like I'm getting this from like some like health food store. It's from the pharmacy. They feel better on this than synthetic thyroid medication.
But and the overall point is that that sort of anti-thyroid effect of birth control is being mitigated by something else. So you see the scale kind of evens out. Yeah. And that's what's important. And having the context of having PCOS and getting that treated using the birth control, there's still something else you're doing to balance out some of the negative side effects of the birth control. And that's what people do not get, is it's never in isolation. So even when I was eating candy and stuff, I was avoiding all seed oils. I was extremely strict. I always made sure I had at least 5 bananas a day, right? I would make sure I got all my vitamin C for the day. I would drink juices still, so I'd be getting a lot of potassium. Like it was not like I was just subsisting off of candy alone. Like absolutely, you would feel like crap.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think it's worth mentioning, like I had hypothyroidism prior to going on birth control. I just didn't know it. So this is a whole other story that we can talk about, where I was tested for hypothyroidism due to my weight. The doctor looked at test results and told me they were normal. 5 years later, I went to an endocrinologist because my thyroid results that a different doctor had done came back as abnormal. They retested me and said, yep, your thyroid results match these thyroid results. You definitely have hypothyroidism. Let's get you on medication. And then she saw my test result from 5 years prior, and she was like, why weren't you on medication already? And I was like, and I remembered them doing that test. So I'm like, well, they told me I was normal. And she was like, this isn't a normal test result. You should have been on medication.
Oh my gosh.
So the doctor who did the original test misread or like was just so incompetent, didn't understand that that was a bad test result.
Right.
And didn't put me
Crazy.
on thyroid medication. And those 5 years is where I gained the most of my weight
Yep.
because I had a freaking hypothyroidism and PCOS together being untreated. And
Crazy.
it
Yeah,
was completely
that's
crazy.
disaster. And that's the thing, like that kind of stuff is gonna make you really, really hungry.
Yeah.
I don't care what anyone says. And
Yeah.
again, even if you're not massively overeating, if you're overeating, because you said I've talked with Lisa and she's talked about how she has never struggled with binge ED. I have, which is a very different thing. Lisa hasn't, but for you, I remember you telling me it was more of a systematic overeating over time.
Yeah. It was typically eating more calories. There were times where it wasn't binge ED, but it was binge. It was like where I was on my period or right before my period, and I was so low energy that I had to eat a lot of food and a lot of
Mhm.
sugar in order to just be able to stay awake. And
Right.
that's a little different because that's a
It's
response to your body
physical.
system. It's a
Yeah.
physical response versus like a compulsive
Emotional.
response. Or
Mhm.
yeah. And so that was a whole other thing. So I'm sure that also got calories to it. But if you have a non-working thyroid and you also have
Yeah.
PCOS, even if you are eating a normal amount of food, it's still going to be
Yeah.
difficult to lose weight. Or you're
Yes.
going to gain weight because your metabolism is slower in that regard. People always talk about slow metabolism, and that's why they're overweight. And it's a completely different thing. Like this is two diseases causing a slow metabolism
Yeah.
versus like, oh, I just genetically have a slow metabolism, which is just not a
No,
thing.
no. Right. And that's the thing
Mhm.
too, is so even those two diseases will
Mhm.
also cause hunger because they both will cause insulin
Mhm.
resistance.
Yeah.
And when you combine things too, like a lot of people don't realize this, but when it comes to hormonal problems, when you combine it and they layer onto each other, it can be very intense.
Yeah.
So it's like it definitely affected your hunger levels.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
And
I
that's
was
what a lot of people would not ever acknowledge. They just
definitely,
would say, you have no self-control. And
definitely.
that's not helpful.
Yeah, so it was like, so you're stagnant because of those diseases where it's difficult to lose weight naturally. And then on top of it, you're super hungry. So you're already it's just you're gaining weight very slowly. So if I was doing
Mhm.
everything right, I would be gaining weight very, very slowly.
Right.
But because of the issues of fatigue and having no energy and having to work to
Mm,
like, live your life and
of
like buy
course.
things, have electricity, you have to have energy. And
Yes.
so I have to eat more. So it was like just to be able to make it through the day, I have to eat,
Yeah.
or else I'd be like passing out at work. Like that happened that one
Right.
time.
Because what people don't
Mhm.
understand is when you have insulin resistance, your body is putting more insulin out there. So all the sugar that you're eating, it's going directly into your fat cells
Mhm.
and it's getting out of the blood. And also too, your cells are not receiving that sugar as well because it's not getting the signal from insulin, but your fat cells still do. So a lot of the sugar you're eating is going into your fat and you're not getting the energy. And if you're not getting the energy, then you will be hungry. You
Yeah.
will feel like you didn't eat.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare situation, but this is a state of disease. This is not normal. This is
Yeah.
not what anybody should be going through, but it's very common. And I just also want to add to what you said about how people have conversion issues. One of the most common sources of a conversion issue between your thyroid, within thyroid hormone is fatty liver, which
Yeah.
is extremely common in morbidly obese people.
Yeah. And and conversion can also be interrupted by inflammation, and absorption is
Mhm.
interrupted by inflammation. So the inflammation can be the number one cause of why T4 is not converted into T3 properly. And I know you talk
Mm.
about PUFA on your channel all the time. Well, what does PUFA, seed oils, and such do? It causes massive amounts of inflammation in your
Mhm.
body. This is can be directly correlated to hypothyroidism.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. All right. So let's see.
I do want to make a quick note about
Mm,
birth control because, like, I don't want to make it out there like, oh, this is the cure all for everything, because
right.
I don't think people should be on it their entire lives. Like, my goal for this is to lose all the weight and then work my way off birth control.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that if I do get to a healthy weight, my PCOS symptoms will be mitigated and then I won't have to be on it anymore, because I don't want to
Right.
be on it long term. And I just feel like that's worth mentioning.
Yes. Yes, and that's another thing too.
Hmm.
I will say here, I haven't really been eating candy
Hmm.
lately, so it's kind of phasing out, right?
Hmm.
So it is temporary, like you said. A lot of these things can be temporary measures for a specific point of time,
Yeah.
and that's also really different than advocating for something for your whole life,
Yeah.
And I think I will just say there's no judgment for me about you being on birth control. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Yeah. Well, I
I think
remember one of the first
Mhm.
conversations we had, you're like, "Yeah, you should really consider getting off of that." I was like, "Let me tell you my life story."
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously this is not for you, right?
Mhm.
And that's the thing is like we have to acknowledge different circumstances, like and again, it's not always that every single thing is an advantage. Like we talk a lot about being male versus female. There are some disadvantages in a weight loss journey when you are male. And one of them is that a male body, we cannot handle hormone fluctuation nearly as well as women can because our bodies are not really designed to have constant shifting of hormones. So within a weight loss journey, that PUFA in your fat, it's releasing, and the aromatase in the fat and all this stuff, your estrogen levels are fluctuating a lot throughout a weight loss journey as a man. And it's very, very difficult. And it can affect your mind really, really a lot. And for a lot of men, estrogen will actually, it makes your adrenaline go up too, because those are two correlated hormones. So when your adrenaline is up, then you can actually become more aggressive.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think of, high estrogen men as being super docile and passive, and that can be true, but it can also, when it gets to a certain level, if it's really high, then they can become aggressive. Like I have had anger issues and stuff because of my estrogen fluctuation, and this can happen within a day-by-day basis when you're this big. Now,
Definitely.
obviously, as I lose weight, it's not going to be that way at all. That'll go away. But when people are really, really big, these things have a factor. I get very bad migraines when my estrogen comes down.
I do know when it comes to estrogen, like this is another thing people don't understand with PCOS. It's so depending on what your severity of PCOS is, and they still don't really understand why this happens or what stage of PCOS happens. Sometimes you have very high estrogen, but then sometimes you have very,
Mm,
very, very, very low estrogen, and that's what happened to me. Is I was
mhm,
crashed out, and that's why the birth control benefited me, because it was adding estrogen to my body. So when I have estrogen crashes, which still happens because the hormonal birth control puts you on like a cycle still, I get severe TMJ. And
mm,
because there's estrogen receptors in your jaw. And if you get estrogen crashes or progesterone crashes, because both happen, it causes inflammation in this area, which causes the TMJ, especially if you have loose jaw joints, which I do. And so
mhm,
I get really, really severe TMJ during
mhm.
estrogen crashes.
Right.
Hmm.
No, and it's
Yeah.
that's the thing. Estrogen is it's not just a female hormone, testosterone is not just a male hormone. None of that exists. I have progesterone in me, you have testosterone in you, right? We all have all these hormones. It's just in different amounts. And a male body is not designed for fluctuation. So I have,
Hmm.
when I do have estrogen fluctuations within fat loss,
Hmm.
I have very severe effects.
Yeah.
I have to run to the bathroom, for example. I have to, I get very moody and I'll get very angry, or I'll get
Yeah.
very sad, right? So it's very difficult, but it is getting better, obviously.
Hmm.
But when you're severe, as a man, sometimes people will they'll kind of demonize you. That's
Yeah.
basically the thing.
Yeah. And I want to go back and talk about a little bit more about inflammation and how
Mhm.
just how it really does affect you and cause these diseases. So we know that inflammation definitely has an impact on the thyroid and how well thyroid hormones are absorbed and how they're converted. And they really don't know what the cause of PCOS is. My personal opinion is 10, 15 years from now, we're going to find out it's due to
Mm,
inflammation. And I've actually had blood test results that show I had high amount of inflammation in my
right.
body. So there's two inflammation tests that you can take, and one is called the ESR, and the other one's called the CRP. And I'm going to pull up. You guys
Mhm.
won't be able to see it, but I got to pull it up on my phone so I can take a look at it. ESR, which is called the erythrocyte sedimentation rate. The average your ESR should be between 0 and 18 mm per HR, which I have no idea what that means. The whole point is though is that mine was not that. Mine was not between 0 and 18. Mine was 75.
Oh, wow.
That's really high. And so for perspective, well, what does that mean? Well, when you start to get to 100, doctors start looking for cancer. And
Oh,
so when it's around 75, they start looking for autoimmune diseases. So I did not have an autoimmune disease. I did not have cancer, but my doctor was freaked out and really concerned because she's like, this is not good. And then it came back on multiple tests. So it wasn't like it was a one
right.
and done thing. And then there was the C reactive protein, also known as CRP, and the average for that was between 0 and 7.9 mg per L, probably milligram per liter is probably what that means. And I had, so between 0 and 7.9, and I had 45.2. And so both of those came back very, very high, showing chronic inflammation in my body. And there's probably two causes to this. One was I ended up being diagnosed with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome by a specialist. It's a just side note here. People are going to hear that and they're going to be like, she's not really sick, because it's like the most fake disease out there. But I actually
Oh,
was diagnosed by a specialist, and my dad has it too.
oh,
So it's a
man.
real thing. So it was that because I was having so much joint pain. And so that
Mm,
was when you have like your joints are not working properly, it's causing inflammation. But also, in my personal opinion, a lot of the inflammation was being caused by polyunsaturated fats, seed
right,
oils, and such. I didn't know I shouldn't be eating at the time. And
right,
so having these really bad things in my diet was causing very high inflammation because I didn't have
right,
cancer and I didn't have an autoimmune disease. I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, hypothyroidism, and a genetic Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
right. Which the genetic syndrome probably gave a good match point for that
Mhm.
inflammation, because
Yeah.
I've from what you've told me, you injure yourself really easily, and
Yeah.
that causes inflammation.
And it was also a huge barrier to weight loss because if you're trying to exercise, but walking on a flat surface sober causes you to sprain your ankle over and over and over again, it just it completely messes you up. Because that's another thing people don't take into consideration when it comes to weight loss is that if you're injured and you're not able to live your day as like you usually do, walk normally and exert that day-to-day calorie exercise,
Right,
you're still eating the same amount. Your body does not recognize that you're
right,
not walking all day long. So that also causes weight gain. You're
right,
you're eating more than you should, but to your brain, you're eating as much as you need to.
right.
Mhm.
I agree. Okay, so go ahead and tell us, Lisa, what are you doing to lose weight?
Yeah, so I'm kind of doing a modified version of Alex's thyroid protocol. I'm doing what specifically works for me. I'm
Mhm,
a very big believer in eliminating the seed oils. I've almost entirely eliminated them from my day to day life. There's a couple exceptions I make. Like obviously, if I eat out at a restaurant, I don't really know if they're using it or not, but I'm not
mhm,
eating out every night. So I'm, but in my personal like life in my home, there are no seed oils to be
mhm,
seen. No, none of the hateful eight, as we call them. And I'm also just making sure that I'm eating lots and lots of steak, eggs, bacon, things that are high in
right,
saturated fat. Because not only is it good for you, in my personal opinion, and what I think the science shows, and doctors might be against this, but the science does show this, it also satiates you. Your body feels more fulfilled when you eat it. And I eat lots and lots and lots of fruit. I try to have 2 to 3 servings of fruit per
mhm,
meal, and this gives me lots of vitamins, the potassium,
mhm.
magnesium, and all the sugars and carbohydrates that I need to get through my day.
Yes, and it also will lessen insulin resistance because of
Yes.
that potassium and vitamin C in the fruit. which is very important because that will
Yes.
also regulate your appetite. So it's really important. But I do agree with the saturated fat sentiment. One thing that keto did give me is it showed me that saturated fat does not make you fat, because I would lose weight eating huge amounts of meat and cheese and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I never had a fear of it because of keto. So that's
Yeah.
one thing keto did give me.
And the original study that demonized saturated fat, I believe it was back in the 1960s, was funded by the sugar industry because doctors were going to start to come after sugar. Now, I'm not demonizing sugar here,
Right.
but sugar definitely threw saturated fat under the bus to save themselves.
Yes.
And and so that's how that whole thing got started. And all the research from that has been based on that one study that was funded by the sugar industry. And they
Right.
actually, there's proof of this, they paid off doctors. It was a $10,000 payment to support that study. And so there's a
Right.
lot of it's so many doctors have come around to the idea that saturated fat is fine, and there's more and more studies coming out that it
Mhm.
actually does not raise your cholesterol unless you have some kind of weird genetic predisposition,
Right.
which is not most people. And but a lot of them are still stuck in the old days of that 90s research where they are saying, just eat 10 servings of bread a day.
Right, which is not helpful. That's weight gain city for
Yeah.
sure. But I think too, they don't understand that again, it's a lot often the interaction. So one thing that can contribute to insulin resistance is the PUFA in and of itself. So especially if you combine sugar with PUFA. So if you eat something like a donut, that is going to be like super diabetes-ish, okay,
Yeah.
compared to eating a can of soda or having a can of soda with nothing else.
Yeah.
That will cause it to go up and then back down. But that donut, it will be up and it'll just stay up. And same with breads. And, a lot of bread has those seed oils in it.
Yeah.
And when you eat bread, your insulin will stay sky high for way longer than just a piece of candy
Yeah.
or a soda. And that's why I talk about it in that way. Does that mean that you should be living off of Coke and Sour Patch Kids? No, they don't have any nutrients in them other than sugar, which is an important nutrient, but it's not meant to be in isolation, which we know that from nature, right?
Yeah.
We would get it from fruit. You get it
Yeah.
from honey and, these other things. Coconuts, for example.
Yeah, coconuts are really important to like a lot of communities back in the day.
Yeah.
And I will say with sugar too, like a lot of keto people will look back on history and be like, okay, well, what changed? And it's like, oh, we started putting sugar in more things, and that's why people got fat. But also not looking at the whole that in that same era. The 60s were wild, right? That's also when we started introducing seed oils to our
Yeah.
food as well. This all seemed to happen at once.
Yes. And
Mhm.
people ate a lot of sugar in the 50s and people weren't that big back then, so it wasn't that. And they were also eating steak and eggs every day, right? And
Yeah.
it wasn't that either. So it's like, I think I don't know who they is, but somebody seems to pit the pro saturated fat people versus the pro sugar people against each other. And people will get really angry, especially keto people. They get very triggered when I talk about sugar being okay. It is like,
Yeah.
and I get it. I was keto. It is like a fundamental belief of your life when
Yeah.
you get up every morning.
I held that belief for
But
20 years. Like I'm still not like on I talked about the opposite. I'm not on board with the whole eating lots and lots of candy.
no,
I'll just binge on fruit instead to get that energy. But it's what works for him. And it's
right.
there, like I
Or
said,
it's
it's
what
not as
works
bad as he
more.
was like, I'm going to drink a gallon of peanut oil, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's the thing, like, there's a difference between being in a super severe state or a hyper stress state, and requiring candy during that time versus, like, where I'm at now. I'm much better this year. I don't really need it anymore, I don't even have cravings, and that's the thing, like, I do believe willpower is important, but your willpower needs to be utilized in the best way, which is against seed oils. That's the absolute best way to use
Yeah.
your willpower, because you can't have willpower against all the, against fat and sugar and everything, like all the time. Like you just can't. Like
Yeah.
you have to still live. And the thing is, like, it's not really the candy. Like if somebody's like, candy isn't great, I completely get that. There are issues with candy. I experienced issues with candy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be like the candy salesman. I'm not sponsored by Sour Patch Kids, right? I'm not sponsored by the sugar industry. But what I will say is, when you demonize sugar, you're demonizing things like putting sugar in coffee, which can be really beneficial, or having a sweetened yogurt, or maybe it's easier for you to have strawberries if you put a spoonful of sugar on top, right? That's what you're demonizing, and people don't realize that. It's not, or people take it further and they say, oh, well, there's sugar in fruit, right? So you will, oftentimes people will say sugar's bad, and they don't understand that the message they're giving to people is that all forms of sugar in any situation are bad. And when it comes to fruit, fruit is essential.
Yeah.
It's not just a suggestion, it is essential to
And that was
being healthy.
definitely, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that was definitely what was drilled into me by
Yeah.
not only people around me, by the community at large, by my media, but also by doctors who are
Mhm.
telling me not to eat fruit.
Right. And
Crazy.
that's what I'm saying. And I say many times, my experience, and this is my experience, I cured my night blindness eating bags of candy every day.
Wow.
And that will not be everybody's experience, but that was mine because I made sure, like I said, I'd have a thing of juice with it, I'd have bananas with it, and I would not have any PUFA. And I made sure I had all my other bases covered in the day. So it was not like I just ate candy and lived off of that. No, but I needed it because I was so severe. I had no energy. I was so sick that it helped. And it actually did break down that insulin resistance, because your body also has to get used to using carbs too. It's a weird catch 22.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't ever have carbs, like when you're keto, like I was, your body does not have any carb tolerance when you get off of it. And that's why
Yeah.
it's so easy to gain huge amounts of weight after,
Love
because
it.
you get really, really high insulin issues. Your insulin goes sky high after you have been keto for a while.
Yeah.
And so I had to, because I was so hungry for carbs too. And again, people will say, oh my gosh, you're coping, or you're this, or you're that. And it's like, I guess my body is coping with a state of severe hypothyroidism
Yeah.
and severe insulin issues and adrenal problems, right? But it's over.
Yeah.
Couple years down the line, I'm not even having cravings for candy right now at
That's
all,
awesome.
0. And I don't think I'm gonna go back at this time, because we're getting into spring and it's getting warmer and I'm fine, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I always will say, like, if you don't need to get on birth control, then don't. If you don't need to eat candy, then don't. But there
Yeah.
may be something that you need to do, but it's not always for everybody for their whole life. You know, it's like it can be for a crisis situation of health.
Yeah.
And that's what I need you guys to understand.
Yes, definitely.
You gotta use your brain. We have to think for ourselves, period.
Yeah, and I think this brings us to like full circle to like the main point of this is
Mhm.
like how is it that so many people, and women especially, are joining the fat acceptance community? And if you paid attention at all to this video and you heard my horrific
Yeah.
interactions with medical professionals, misdiagnosing me over and over again, giving me bad health advice, not being able to read test results. And basically, like, this is part I didn't cover, treated me like crap, because there have been times where
Ooh.
I lost 85 pounds and I lost it in a year. And a doctor said to me that if I had actually done everything right, I would have lost more. You know, the crazy stuff like that. Like that there's, in my opinion,
What?
yes.
So, okay, so he was
Yeah.
saying 85 in a year wasn't enough.
Yeah. He was based
What the
So I was basically on a diet and I was on different medications for my hormones, and I was on Medicaid at the time. So I wasn't able to choose my doctor, and to change doctors was a months and months long process, just
Right.
due to new doctor availability. And I was assigned this one doctor, and he took me off my medications because they didn't have my records, and he didn't for some reason believe me, which is weird. This is the weird thing of not being believed by doctors, because they didn't have my records yet. And I was like crying because like, I need these medications to function. And it was
Right.
like the birth control and stuff. And it was a huge argument to get the birth control. And he was like, and I was like, well, clearly it works. Clearly it's working. The help with my hormonal issues because I've lost 85 pounds in the last year. And he just said, well, you would have lost more if you were actually doing everything right, if it was actually working.
85 is a lot,
It's a lot.
especially
I
for
mean,
a woman.
technically, you can lose 104 pounds in 52 weeks, which is a year, but nobody's on it every single day of the week. Like 85 was pretty
85 is
good.
a lot.
Yeah. And that
It's
whole,
not like you're like
yeah,
6'1", Lisa.
I
That's a
know.
lot.
And that whole experience like was what caused me to regain the weight because it was
Yeah.
like it was so demoralizing. I was crashing like emotionally and hormonally because I wasn't on the medication I needed to be
Yeah.
on that I had been on for a while. You're not supposed to go cold turkey on some of
No.
this stuff. Your body can't handle it. And that's exactly what he did to me because he was a horrible doctor. And I
Right.
hope he loses his license someday. I'm just gonna say it. And so but I'm not the only person who has the
Right. It's
experiences.
common.
And it's things like this that make people want to join the fat acceptance community because they don't have anyone to turn to. The people they're supposed to turn to, the people with the knowledge to lose weight
Mhm.
supposedly, are giving them crappy advice and are saying crappy things to them. I talked to you about this one time about how I was like fat acceptance for like a week, maybe. You know? And it was like, and it was I was in my mid-20s and I was like struggling to lose weight. I had just started treatment for PCOS in Japan and it like I wasn't losing weight. And I was talking to my friend, I was like, geez, maybe I'm just meant to be this size if it's not working. And my friend was like, yeah, maybe you are. You know, I look at people like Tess Holiday and I love her body type and she's just meant to be that big. And I think it was that switch in my brain that was like, well, Tess Holiday is definitely not healthy. And so
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like, it was that cognitive dissonance thing that snapped me back to reality where I was like, no, you can't not be healthy at every size, you know?
Right. No, 'cause I remember this one picture of her where she's at Disneyland, and you can just see how miserable she really is, and
Yeah.
it's like when you're really fat, you know what that feels like. Like, I saw that picture of her, and I was like, "I've been there.
Yeah.
I know what she's feeling. It is awful."
And I've literally been there because I was at Disney World last year and I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I can walk another step, you know, like being like obese.
Yeah, and it's
But
not I mean, we're laughing, but it's not really all that funny. It's actually kinda sad, and
yeah.
but it's like,
Well, we can laugh because we know what it's like.
yeah.
Yeah. We relate.
Yeah, it's relatable for
Yeah.
sure, but it's also like she's definitely not healthy, like, and we
Yeah.
know, and that's yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I myself, I was never fat acceptance, but I was, "Don't talk to me about my weight." That was
Yeah.
my big thing when I was in my teens. "Don't talk to me about it. I don't wanna talk about this." That was my thing. So
Yeah.
it's kinda similar, but it's not exactly the same.
Yeah. And I we talked about this too, where I was like, I'm not a joiner. And so I always quote that, like, I think it's a Mark Twain quote where he's like, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to reform. And just every overweight woman I knew, and even the women who were not overweight, were on board with the whole fat acceptance thing. And I'm like, this is a little weird that everybody agrees.
Yeah,
And so it just made me rethink it a little bit more. And I think that's why I didn't get into it, but I definitely with my experience, if these people had similar or like even somewhat close experiences to the experience I had in the medical
right.
setting,
It
no
came from somewhere.
wonder. Yeah, no
Mhm.
wonder. Did like this community did not happen out of a vacuum.
Yeah.
It's directly connected to poor medical practice.
Yes. I completely agree. I think you need to be listened to, and again, maybe this is where a lot of some of the criticism it's that I get, it's this mindset of like, well, this is how it is. People are very dogmatic, and I think they learn that from doctors because that's how
Yeah.
doctors are.
Yeah.
And doctors need to understand that science is always evolving.
Yeah.
There may be unanswered questions or interactions with things that we don't understand. And I can assure you, like, if I would have known about the PUFA 10 years ago, I know damn well I would never have had half of the issues I had. I never would have
Yeah.
even gotten as severe as I did. I never would have even had to eat candy, you know? I would
Yeah.
never have been arguing with somebody about it because it wouldn't have happened because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have needed it. And I only
Definitely.
started eating candy like that after severe trauma and certain catalytic events in times of my life where my hypo got worse. And it was because it was stressful. I was already in a bad place and I was trying to diet and trying to do things that were very high in PUFA because for some reason nobody talks about that one.
Yeah.
Fat is demonized, saturated fat is demonized, your sugar is demonized, meat is demonized, dairy is demonized, fruit is demonized, but never these PUFAs. They, for some reason, they go scot-free in the public, conscious. And
Yeah.
I I wish I would have known.
Me
That's why I
too.
talk about it.
Me too. Yeah. And that reminds me of some of the advice I received from doctors about, well, if you lose weight, your PCOS symptoms will go away. But yeah, there is research to support that, but they never talk about, okay, well, what did those people specifically do to lose weight?
Right.
Did they just naturally cut out the seed oils without thinking about it? Did they naturally reduce
Mm.
inflammation in their bodies on that journey of losing weight? Because that could have been the cause
Mhm.
of not the actual losing weight itself, but the reduction of
Right.
inflammation.
Which a lot of people, they view your weight as the be all end all of health. And I
Mhm.
did that myself. And I actually harmed myself so terribly
Mhm.
by doing keto because I was losing weight and I didn't care about my health. I came at it from a very typical view, which is your weight is your health, and it's not.
Yeah.
Even though I have not lost tons of weight in the past 2 years, it'll be 2 years that I've been doing this protocol March 15th. Even though I have not lost massive amounts of weight in 2 years, where I'm at mentally, how I think, my relationships with people, my actual health markers and metabolism markers, everything, I am a completely different person
Yeah.
than I was 2 years ago.
Definitely.
I I don't even know if I could be having this conversation 2 years ago. Like I was so anxious, honestly. Like I
Mhm.
was just so crazy,
Yeah.
especially after 2020, which that was a crazy year. But it's like I am a completely different person now because I focused on the health and not the weight.
Yeah.
And that's so important. And that's exactly what you're doing too. And the weight comes after the health.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah,
you got to do
definitely.
the health first and then you take care of it because it is a
Yeah.
problem. And I don't think it should be accepted.
Definitely. And that actually reminds me of something people always talk about. They're like, women go on birth control and they go crazy. Well, for me, it was the opposite. I was a crazy person. And then I went on birth control and I wasn't
Yeah.
crazy anymore. And I definitely also would not be able to have this conversation because I was anxiety through the roof. I was just neurotic. I was anger issues through
Mhm.
through the roof as well. And and it's like, here's the thing, people are gonna like clip that out of context and be like, Alex is saying you could be healthy at every size, you don't have to lose the fat. Sorry, he's like, no, there are other things too that you also need to deal with along
First.
with losing fat
Yeah.
first or at the same time, whatever
Mhm.
order you need to do in order to get yourself healthy.
Right. Which it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning.
Yeah.
Focusing on your health is the beginning of it. The weight comes after. I do not
Yeah.
accept fatness. I never have. I would not have been dieting the past 10 years. I would not have been searching for answers if I accepted it. It's ridiculous for anybody to ever say that I accept it. I do not. And I would never advocate for Lisa or anyone else to accept being fat. I just wouldn't. I don't think it's good. It's bad in of itself,
Yeah.
because it is hormonally active and it causes health and physical problems or mental health and physical issues just being bigger. And most big people resonate with that. And we know that unless if you're being a liar on
Yeah.
TikTok, unless if you're being Hannah Talks Bodies.
she there are some of them where I feel bad for them, and she is like the one I do not feel bad for because she is the most like like, what is it? The Maleficent, right? She's
Malignant.
like,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Yeah.
My brain was trying to say malignant, but I was like, don't say malignant, Maleficent. And so, she's just like, was that even a word, Maleficent?
It is
Yeah,
actually.
malevolent. I don't know.
Malevolent is the word you were thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, guys, it's late. But yeah, she's actively encouraging people to not lose weight. She's
Yeah.
telling you it's impossible. She's demoralizing you. And then she's also going as far to basically say you're a bad person if you tell people otherwise.
Right.
And it's just we need to get rid of that kind of attitude. And the one way we can fix this, if we can fix healthcare, we can fix this problem of running to people like Hannah Talks Bodies
Right.
and getting them into the fat acceptance community and getting them all on the fat liberation train. Okay. It's got to be a team effort. We got
Right.
to, we need medical students to hear this. Stop listening to the healthy at every size stuff. Okay. It's going to be,
Right.
it's health honesty combined with provide adequate medical care to people and listen to your patients.
And combined with, most importantly, in a lot of ways, an individualized approach for where the person is at
Yeah.
and what issues they have currently. Because that is really, and I get it, right? It's difficult. You have to actually get to know a person. You have to actually work with somebody. You can't have a one size fits all. But obesity is not a one size fits all issue. It's multifaceted usually. Not to say that there isn't the overarching theme of you're eating too much. That can be true. Two things can be true at once.
Yeah.
But people eat too much for different reasons.
Yeah.
That's what people don't understand. Because even any psychological reasoning, it's still valid. Like if you are severely depressed, if you went through childhood trauma, it is valid. Like, and it has to be dealt with. And so where I get so angry with fat acceptance is that they use that as a shield to make any changes. They say, I have trauma, I have PCOS, I have hypothyroid, therefore I should never do anything about it. And how dare you say anything to me? That's not the truth. You can treat all those things. There are paths and people you can work with and find answers and healing from all these things. And we need to heal holistically, So like I said, it really, I'm very sorry to hear your experience because it's just awful because it's
Yeah.
so many years that it didn't
Yeah.
have to be that way.
Definitely. And like I said, I am 33. I basically lost all my 20s to poor medical care. But, the good news is that I'm losing weight now and I'm on
Right.
track now. And I found a solution that actually works. I'm helping people can also use this solution to help benefit them as
Right.
well. Like I've talked about, I do document a lot of this on my YouTube channel.
Mhm.
I have it in the description of my name here, at least like at Lisa King
Yeah,
Gold King.
that's her handle.
That's my handle for my YouTube channel. Alex is also going to be putting the link to my channel in the description box for this video. I know he is. And
Yes, of
and he
course.
will and he's also going to encourage you to follow me because I do a lot of
Oh
great
my
stuff on
gosh.
there.
Yes, please do follow Lisa. I like her fat reactions as well. She has a more like a level-headed response usually than me. I'm a little bit sassier, but I do appreciate it. And I do like, she has this whole Harry Potter makeup series, and
Yeah.
I was obsessed. She got me hooked about talking about the houses like forever. It was crazy.
Yeah. And that's one of my things that I always talk about on my channel. It's like, why are you doing makeup videos alongside like fat reaction things? And part of my thing is like, and you've talked about this too as well, is like you have to live
Mhm,
your life as a fat person because if you go out and live your life, it gives you confidence, it gives you
mhm.
happiness, it motivates you and keeps you on track to lose weight.
Yes.
And so doing makeup is something that makes me feel like pretty and confident. And it's part of the journey.
Yeah, and it's fun. And the reasons why I say that is really twofold. One is that your health journey, if you're super morbidly obese, it's long. It's 3 or 4 years. It's
Yeah.
a long time, and you have to live your life during that time. And the other aspect of it is that it's just fun,
Mhm.
and when you're dealing with your hormonal issues, like one of my things with this thyroid protocol is I had actual energy, and you have to put that energy towards things.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're just going to be, really anxious and weird. You got to
Mhm.
like live and like get stuff out, go to the gym and stuff. Like you got to like go to the beach or go outside, like have friends. Like, I've had so many relationship benefits from getting my hormones under control. And it's so nice to like be at much more peace with people in my life. And it's
Definitely.
beautiful, but you got to live it to the fullest, absolutely. And that's a part of healing too. So yes, do the makeup videos, do the stuff, and look pretty and do that stuff. Like we should all live our lives to the fullest and have fun and be happy as we can.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. 100%.
All right, you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please do like it. Remember, again, do go subscribe to Miss Lisa, and we'll see you soon. I'm sure Lisa will be back.
Yes, definitely.
I'm sure she will. But go ahead and leave your comments below, like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys again very soon. Bye-bye.